Sunday, March 22, 2026. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. Our guest today is a staff writer at The Atlantic, covering politics and national affairs, known for his in-depth reporting on the Trump presidency. His 2025 book, The Project, How Project 2025 is Reshaping America, was a New York Times bestseller. David A. Graham, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thank you for having me.
It's tough times that we find ourselves in right now, David. In fact, you wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago in The Atlantic entitled, "Trump Can't Decide Whether the Iran War is Still Going On." And you basically said that he seems to be at odds with both himself and his Secretary of Defense about the status of the conflict. We're now hearing that the US is considering plans to occupy or blockade Iran's strategically crucial Karg Island to pressure Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. This war seems to be without strategy or direction. How do you think it's going to end, or might it never end if Trump refuses to concede?
I can't see how it ends at all. I mean, he's been talking about either unconditional surrender or just giving up and taking his stuff and going home. So it's hard to know what he wants, but I don't see how he extracts himself from this easily. We've got oil prices going up around the world. We have countries, allies and enemies alike, who are upset with the United States. And still no plan. If anything, he seems more confused than he did a week and a half ago, which is not where you would hope to be as the war escalates.
Right. I mean, I get the feeling that this presidency, they kind of pull a strategy together after they've, pulled the trigger. And that really is fighting fires, isn't it? It's not really strategy at all. Do you think he realized that, there is a reason why no other president has tried to attack Iran in this way before? And, him claiming, I'm the only one who's done it. I mean, the irony there is he's the only one crazy enough to have done it.
Yeah, I'm not sure he has the introspection to make that connection. But it does feel very much like it's all strategy after the fact. And, I think about the comparison to the Bush presidency, where they had, at least initially, success in Afghanistan and got very excited about that and launched a war in Iraq. And I didn't think that you could launch a war in the Middle East with less foresight and planning, but of course that's exactly what we've done here. And it seems like a similar situation where they got so, fired up by their success as they saw it in Venezuela that they were ready to take on something else. And it's amazing all the warning signs that were ignored, both, years of administrations, many administrations pointing out the straits would be closed. Trump's own chairman of the Joint Chiefs reportedly telling him the strait could be closed. And he just wrote all that off and decided he would get it done.
Do you think mental illness plays quite a big part in this? Because, as I see it, he doesn't process things the way the rest of us do. And whether it be the narcissistic personality disorder, whether it be the dementia, I'm not qualified to say, but I recognize that there doesn't seem to be any conscience at all for this stuff. And I've said before, if you found out that you had potentially killed 170 children in a school on the first day of the war, you might want to just pause and take stock. But that one he just completely glossed over.
Oh, yeah. And even in the way he talks about the deaths of American service members, the sort of, bad things happen in war. We've seen callous presidents in the past, certainly, but none who was so willing to advertise his callousness to the public. And in a way that could be politically damaging too. It's really disturbing to hear that.
I get a sense that people don't really know how to process a lot of this because it hasn't really happened in this way before. With the Iraq War, Bush had to try and sell it to the American people first. Now, admittedly, he lied and I was living in the UK at the time, and Tony Blair was parroting the Bush talking points, and we had weapons of mass destruction and all that narrative that we remember so well. And they went ahead anyway. But this time, Trump didn't just not try and tell the American people. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't tell European allies or any allies for that matter. How much of this do you think is being driven by Israel? And is Trump kind of just riding the coattails of Benjamin Netanyahu?
It's been really interesting to hear how they talk about this, and to hear even somebody like Marco Rubio, who is fairly hawkish, saying, well, the Israelis were going to do it, so we had to do it. I do think that, the Israeli government seems to be maybe in the pilot seat and the U.S. is in the co-pilot seat. All that said, I mean, Trump's animosity towards Iran is of long standing. And when you hear members of the administration and allies of the president talk about, well, it's actually a 47-year war. On the one hand, I think that's a ridiculous way to think about it, but I think it is a window into the way they see it. And Trump seems, he's still fighting. We know he's always fighting wars from the 80s and 90s. All of his grudges and all of his worldview comes from those periods. And I think it's the same thing. He's still stuck in 1979. He really resents Iran. He talked about Obama's nuclear deal. He railed against those things. So in some ways, I think he just needed an excuse. And he got it. And now he's got the war he wanted.
Because he was always going to do it anyway. I mean, he was moving the ships into place whilst negotiations were going on. We're now hearing other countries, and
that's another way it reminds me of the Iraq War too, where you start deploying military and you say, well, we're not sure if we're going to go to war. Oh, is that so?
But isn't that like a mobster tactic from Trump's perspective? Because that is how he operates. He threatens people in the way a mob boss would threaten people. And I think that he thought that by positioning the armada, it might make Iran think differently. But that speaks to a complete misunderstanding of the culture of the Iranian leadership and the Iranian people.
Right. I mean, I think it's very strange, his understanding of the Iranian people. I mean, he likes to present this idea, perhaps it's not very difficult for him to present, that he's this sort of madman theory approach. He's unpredictable, but he expects every other organization to act in a perfectly rational way. But in Iran, he seems to have misstepped so badly. In just not understanding that if you existentially threaten a group of people, they are likely to push back on that. And he seemed to think that these threats would make them they fold faster. And of course, instead, they have made Iran more desperate to fight back. And it's also very hard for them to seek peace. When you have a president like this who doesn't have a clear objective, who is not an honest broker, who's not reliable in what he says and what he does, even if the Iranians wanted to make peace, how could they possibly trust Trump? They couldn't. And I think that's one reason you see them fighting tooth and nail.
They're also fighting from their own territory.
They are.
And so America and Israel are the occupying forces.
Right.
It is always harder to win when you have the low ground, right?
This is something that you would think Trump, with his relatively small historical reference, would understand. It's very much the Vietnam problem. You can go in and you can drop a lot of bombs on people, but if they're fighting for their homes, you can't just get rid of them. It doesn't work in that way. And he seems to have missed that lesson entirely.
I want to go back to something that you said, which I think is interesting. Everything you say is interesting, but one particular point, David, and that is about Trump and his strategy as to kind of confuse the enemy versus him just having no strategy and then pretending that was a strategy when in fact there wasn't a plan. Do you see a pattern of this? Because I think that certainly whoever the US's enemies are these days, I don't really know anymore. It's kind of, everyone seems to have switched sides, but that Trump is actually quite easy to second guess because there is rarely a plan. And then he's going to take credit for the confusion and say that was the plan all along.
This is something that everybody except for the kind of MAGA-aligned intellectuals seems to have figured out a long time ago. I think the majority of American voters see this. Certainly world leaders see this. And it's been interesting to see in the last couple weeks these sort of MAGA pundits shocked that Trump went to war, shocked that he didn't have a plan, talking about how maybe he's not all that stable and maybe he isn't thinking ahead. Things that I think have been apparent to everybody else for quite a long time now. And you saw even earlier this year, I think, European leaders still looking for evidence that Trump was acting rationally. In Greenland, that he had some sort of plan, and you could see the lights going on there. Oh no, there's no broader strategy. This isn't thought out. It is what you get, what you see is what you get, and it might change in a half hour. I think that's clear to now with this shift, really everyone.
We've heard this week that Denmark was secretly sending explosives to Greenland to blow up their own runways in case Trump decided to invade. I mean, this is very worrying. When you talk about trust with the Iranians is one thing, especially when you send two realtors to do the negotiations on your behalf. But losing the trust of your allies, certainly in Denmark and the rest of Europe, not least NATO, this is almost the undoing of that transatlantic alliance, isn't it?
Right. I mean, the Danes have been one of the most reliable allies the U.S. has had in military things, and you can see how that trust has been destroyed really vividly in these last few weeks. I mean, look at Trump, saying he doesn't need help from European countries, then demanding they help him, then saying he didn't need it in the first place and he didn't really want it. Again, I mean, what you see is what you get. This is the confusion. This is his approach. He doesn't really have an idea, and he's making it up as he goes along, both his theory of international relations and apparently his theory of reopening the Strait of Hormuz.
With your experience in the research you did for Project 2025, was any of this stuff about Iran kind of baked into the project? I mean, is this something... I mean, you mentioned that obviously it's a personal crusade for Trump and has been for decades, and we know that because he's spoken publicly about Iran and has always had a bee in his beehive about it. But how much do that kind of Heritage Foundation group care about Iran? Because I mean, I thought that they were certainly for free trade as far as I could understand it.
I think it is a place where the Heritage and Project 2025 people have largely been rolled. To me, their alignment is much closer to J.D. Vance, this sense that, the Iranians are bad. We should be friends with the Israelis, but we really shouldn't put a lot of effort into any of this. We need to withdraw from the world. We need to withdraw from Europe, maintain NATO, but not focus on it, withdraw from Africa, put all of our focus on containing China. And that was their interest in military policy, in diplomacy, in trade policy. And instead, what you've seen from Trump is wars in Venezuela and Iran, threatening allies, using tariffs not just against China, but again against Canada, against Brazil as punishment for political stances, against Europe. And you see J.D. Vance, I think, in almost maybe the ultimate humiliation, being marched out to talk about the war and to defend a war that he says privately he didn't support. And I think there's good reason to believe, insofar as he believes in anything, that he opposes this kind of war. So I think they've really gotten rolled. This is one place where the project people have totally lost to Trump, and his sort of interventionist impulses have won.
You wrote a piece entitled J.D. Vance Learns What Mike Pence Already Knows, and you described the vice president realizing that signing on with Trump might seem like a shortcut to the top, but it's actually a guarantee of humiliation. We are seeing contradictory messaging from J.D. Vance, from Marco Rubio, from Pete Hegseth, from Donald Trump, from the Iranians, from Israel. I mean, that it's quite confusing. If there is a kind of shadow government within this government, i.e. like a plan to take over when Donald Trump falls on his sword or, on his sandwich, that is J.D. Vance likely, if he got control of the reins right now, to turn this war off?
I don't think there's any turning it off, which is something that has got to be a little bit scary for Vance. Because you can't, we see Trump now wishing he had an exit strategy as he sees his numbers go down and he sees gas prices go up and oil prices go up. He clearly would like to extract himself, if nothing else, for his own political purposes, and he doesn't know how. I think J.D. Vance may not have liked to do this. And in the end, it may be such a mess that helps him, or it may drag him down. Marco Rubio is riding high right now, but I just can't imagine this is going to turn out well for him, because he's going to be seen as the face of this war, as the one who was willing to defend it and the one who was the most hawkish publicly member of the administration.
Part of the reason why, I guess, one of the new reasons why Trump would never want to leave the White House, and why any of these this gallery of curios would want to remain in power, is because they're all breaking the law. This war is illegal. They went without congressional approval. They went without the approval of the American people, not that that would necessarily count for much. And also just the sheer number of deaths. We haven't really heard the half of it. We're hearing numbers that are way too high for American service personnel, but not least the civilians that are clearly being hit here. Do you think that this war is therefore going to kind of ramp up the effort to batten down the hatches and remain in power at whatever cost, because they know that once they're free, that they're going to be wanted by the international community?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, I would go back earlier and say it's partly a symptom of that already. They have seen that they can get away with these things. They have broken the law so many times and not had any consequences for them. So you can see them, again, get the hubris of going to war without congressional approval, without notifying Congress, without the American, popular support behind them. These are the actions of people who have already concluded that they are above the law, at least for now, but also who are determined to stay in power at any cost. And so, we see at the same time that Trump is doing this, his major domestic priority is the SAVE Act, which is an attempt to help rig the elections. And that, he's trying to buffalo Congress on this, buffalo the Senate on this. So there are these efforts. It's a parallel effort to stay in power and to exert power in these ways. And I think they do belong together for exactly the reason you say.
We talk about this kind of convergence within, the U.S., but what about Israel? I mean, Israel has taken advantage of Donald Trump in this, and now they're sending their missiles to Lebanon, Qatar. I mean, Trump has properties in some of these places. I mean, that's the other thing. He's worried that his resorts and golf courses are going to start to be on the receiving end of this. And just seriously, I mean, it's going to screw up the huge effort that these Gulf nations have made to make their cities more westernized and to welcome tourism. And do you think Trump even knew that Dubai Airport was one of the busiest airports in the world and was like essential for business travel internationally? I mean, do you think he had any idea that it would be closed as a result of his desire to follow Israel into war?
Oh, clearly not. And he seems very surprised by the idea that Iran would be attacking the UAE or any of these Arab countries. I think because he has a remarkably shallow understanding of the history and of the geography.
He doesn't travel, does he?
No. Although Dubai is the sort of place he might, anywhere he has properties, he might have an interest, but he doesn't seem to be cued into it. I think there's a really interesting thing to see. We've, over and over what we've seen is American presidents trying to hug Benjamin Netanyahu close. And again, what Netanyahu does is he takes advantage of that. He uses that to consolidate his own power, and then he strikes out on his own. And we saw that happen with Joe Biden, who, made such a great show of friendship with Israel after the October 2023 attacks. And we see it now with Trump, who claims to be upset at Netanyahu for launching these strikes. Now, it seems that Trump knew about them and was warned. But, the goals that Israel has are not the same as what the Americans have. Israel is interested in weakening a regional enemy. They see Iran as an existential threat, and so chaos there is okay for them. Chaos, I don't think, suits the U.S. well, but Trump didn't understand that and doesn't have a plan for stopping the chaos.
Netanyahu is similar to Trump in as much as he's wanted on fraud crimes and various things, and kind of needs to stay in power to stay out of jail. Do you think that that's kind of what connects them in a way, or does Trump see Israel like Hegseth does and many of these other Christian nationalists as the kind of being the Holy Land and therefore this being a holy war?
I don't think it's as religious for him. It's clearly something for Hegseth where he has this apocalyptic Christian worldview. You see that from Mike Huckabee as well, for example, who's the ambassador to Israel now, I guess. I think for Trump, it is much more transactional, and it's his relationship with Netanyahu. He sees a kindred spirit in him, and I think, given Trump's age, there's a long-standing tradition of seeing Israel as this bastion in the Middle East of democracy, and Trump is just still stuck in a lot of these old worldviews. He likes Netanyahu, he likes Israel personally, but he doesn't think about it from a religious point of view.
So what's in it for him, really? I mean, is it his legacy, What do you think personally drove Trump to do this? Because obviously the official excuses were just garbage, and that, you know, they were going to attack us, so we had to attack them, or they were going to attack us first. I mean, it didn't make any sense. So what is really driving Trump here? Is it these kind of decades old personal opinions, or was there something in the short term, like maybe the Epstein files, that could have been the reason to kind of press go?
So I would say three things. One is of long standing, he has this animosity, so it wasn't that hard to get him to a point of doing something. Two, Epstein files dominating the headlines up until this happened, and suddenly it has gone a little bit underground.
Yeah, well, he started a world war, so I mean,
it turns out you can distract people.
Yeah.
But I also think Trump is in this mindset of thinking a lot about legacy. He sees the writing on the wall. He knows that he's getting old. He knows that he, barring some sort of massive power grab, will have to leave office in a couple of years, in 3 years. And he's doing a lot of moves that look to me aimed at legacy. So he wants to build all these things in Washington, D.C. He wants to establish things with his name on it. He wants to, mint a coin with his face on it. All of these things. And I think the Iran war is a play for that. And I think it is going to be successful, but not in the way he likes. Right now, it looks like it will be a major part of his legacy, and it will be a real stain on his legacy, which is impressive because he has a lot of those already. But right now, this is, I think this has the risk of really engulfing his entire second term.
Does Putin play a role in this at all? Because as I see it, Trump wants to be in this exclusive club of dictators, and he kind of enjoys it when the word dictator is thrown around.
Right.
And he said out loud, well, maybe people need a dictator. And which is very worrying, but to him, it kind of puts him on Mount Rushmore with Putin and Xi and Kim Jong, if he could, get his chisel out and recreate the sandstone. Do you think that because obviously Vladimir Putin is just sitting back and enjoying all this right now because they've had to allow India to buy oil from Russia, for example. I mean, Russia is benefiting financially out of this and isn't really having to do anything. It might even benefit them in Ukraine in the long run.
Yeah, they'd love to see the sort of clefts between allies that are going on, because it makes it easier for them to push on in Ukraine, for sure. I mean, Trump has always had this kinship with, you saw this with Erdogan, for example, in his first term.
Yeah.
The infamous "do not congratulate" memo in the first term, where he congratulated Putin. He really does have this kinship for strongmen, people who are kind of world historical figures, and he, he is trying chiseling his name into it, I think, is a good way of putting it. I like that.
We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about the SAVE Act, which you mentioned. And as we speak, it's being kind of kicked around Congress, and they're pushing for a vote in the Senate. And we'll take a look at how that might change things for the midterms and beyond. We'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. I didn't realize how much a mattress could actually change my sleep until I switched to the Lisa. And from my very first night, it just felt different. Like the perfect balance of soft and supportive. You get that cozy sink-in feeling when you lay down, but you're still totally supported. So I'm not waking up stiff or tossing around trying to get comfortable. What I love is that Lisa designs their mattresses around how people actually sleep, whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or someone who moves around a lot during the night. They've really thought through the comfort and support. And the quality is incredible. Lisa mattresses are designed and assembled right here in the US. They come with free shipping, easy returns, and a 120-night sleep trial, so you can really take the time to see how it works for you. So if you've been thinking about upgrading your sleep, it's a great time. Go to Lisa.com for 20% off mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with promo code WEEKEND. That's LEESA.com, promo code WEEKEND for 20% off mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. Support the show and let them know we sent you after checkout. That's Lisa.com, promo code WEEKEND. We're back on The Weekend Show with David A. Graham. I'm Anthony Davis. David, the SAVE Act is something that sounds more impressive than it is. I mean, it's a kind of clever piece of marketing, isn't it? And Save America Act, to give it its full name. In fact, I think Trump actually changed the name of it, didn't he? He
did.
People to think of it more as, doing your national service, being patriotic if you get behind the SAVE Act. You wrote an article, I think it was back in October now, saying Donald Trump's plan to subvert the midterms is already underway and our election system is reaching a breaking point. And you were talking about the SAVE Act back then and how they've kind of crowbarred transgender athlete legislation into it and the like. But at its core, the SAVE Act could prevent millions of Americans from voting. There's no real documented evidence that this SAVE Act will benefit Republicans directly. I mean, it's all kind of hypothetical, isn't it? That there are going to be more Republicans who've got voter ID, for example, and can identify themselves at the ballot box. Is there any science behind it? And do you think this is a risk that Republicans and Trump are taking in trying to push this through?
I do think it's a risk. And, it's very hard to know exactly what effect this would have. We don't know how many people have easy access to their birth certificates, for example. We don't have reliable numbers on, the density of women who have changed their name after marriage. But I think there are good reasons to believe it might actually backfire on Republicans. If you think about passport holders, they tend to be wealthier, better educated, coastal elites, if you will. These are people who vote Democratic. The people who are not going to have easy access to their birth certificate are going to be older voters. They're going to be rural voters. I think this, I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows, but I think there's a lot of reasons to believe this would hurt a lot of Republican voters and maybe even more Republican voters. But we've seen the Republican Party in the Trump era willing to do things for symbolism, willing to do things to rile up the base that may be politically damaging. And Trump's crusade against vote by mail, I think, is a perfect example of this. Before Trump became obsessed with vote by mail in 2020, it was used roughly equally by Democrats and Republicans, in some places more by Republicans. You look at a place like Arizona, which had really strong vote by mail and was used heavily by older Republican-leaning voters. And Trump went after that. And you've seen Republicans who are uncomfortable with that. Even the RNC itself has quietly nudged people to use vote by mail and said that it's a problem to have these deficits where only Democrats are using vote by mail. But Trump doesn't think about things in those ways. He thinks about things in terms of both his kind of messaging and also this paranoid belief that there are a lot of non-citizens voting. And I think that goes back to the 2016 election. He simply cannot accept that he did not win the popular vote in 2016. And he cannot accept that he did not win the vote at all in 2020. And so he continues to look for some explanation other than reality for that. And non-citizen voting is one of those obsessions.
That's very interesting because I'd never really looked at it like that. I mean, there is no evidence that non-citizens vote in elections. I mean, it's a handful, right?
It's a handful, exactly. There's evidence, and we know what the evidence is because the Heritage Foundation of all people tallies it. They have a really good tracker of voter fraud, and what it shows is this is not an issue. We're talking a handful, a handful over the many cycles. Certainly not enough to change any elections.
Yes, and that's because it's illegal, right? So, and invariably immigrants try not to break the law because they're trying to, enjoy the freedoms that the United States used to offer. I'm saying all that stuff in the past tense now, by the way. So what you're saying is he's putting all of his eggs into that basket because of a grievance about 2020. And that could potentially lose him the next election, certainly the midterms and the candidates that he backs, even though he's not on the ballot himself. I was going to say it was remarkable, but nothing is remarkable with this guy, right? I mean, that goes to the ego and the mental illness, where there is such a personal grievance that he's prepared to believe that something happened when it didn't happen.
Right. Oh, he can never fail. He can only be failed. And in this case, illegal immigrants are his scapegoats for this.
He threatened to not sign any new legislation unless this bill passed. I mean, as you and I are recording this, it hasn't gone up for a vote just yet. What are the odds of this thing actually passing?
It seems very low to me, although, as you say, nothing is remarkable now. So I guess things could change. But it looks very hard to imagine that Republicans can get enough votes to make this happen. The ultimate problem is the filibuster. They need enough votes to kill the filibuster if they want to do this. And Senate Republicans don't seem to have a lot of appetite for that. Part of that is, I think they understand that this might hurt Republican voters. Part of it is they are going to be talking to local officials in their states. And what state election officials and county election officials are saying is, we can't use this law in 2026. If you pass this law, we will not be able to integrate these things in a reasonable way before the elections. It's going to create chaos. And, Republican senators are talking to Republican governors and Republican secretaries of state at the state level, and they don't want to see that. And I think the third and maybe the most important one for them is they are worried they may be in the minority someday, perhaps as soon as January, and they would like to have the filibuster in place then. So all of these things, I think, push against it passing, although, again, I can't rule it out. I think it's also remarkable to hear Trump saying he won't sign any other legislation. That would be a much more credible threat if Trump had any legislative agenda. Yeah. But given that he had one bill he wanted to pass this entire Congress, and he already passed it,
tax cuts,
I'm not sure what he thinks is what he's holding up.
I mean, maybe that's why he said it, because he knew that there was nothing there. In its simplest form, as I try and describe it, Democrats want everyone to vote. Not illegal immigrants, but they
want legal voters, yeah.
All legal voters to vote. And Republicans want as few people to vote as possible and will go out of their way to make that happen, whether it be reducing the number of polling places, misinformation. I mean, they have a whole kind of raft of methods for reducing the vote. Is it because it's easier to manipulate if fewer people vote? Or is it that they know that the country as a whole leans quite progressive, and that actually, that America is not this kind of far-right Christian nationalist nation that they would actually like it to be?
I think there's a couple things there. It's interesting. If we look at the last few cycles in the Trump era, high turnout seems to really help Republicans recently, and that hasn't historically been the case. High turnout has been much better for Democrats. And I suspect that period may be coming to an end, if not in the midterms, then probably in the 2028 election. But it is another example where Republicans may be cutting off their nose to spite their face. But I think that it fits in with a lot of the kind of xenophobic, racist agenda that we've seen in other places. They are convinced there are people who are not real Americans who are voting. They want the electorate to be the real Americans as they see it. And so any of these steps that do anything to do that are good. I also hear, rhetoric from a lot of Republicans saying things like voting is, it's a right, sure, but really it's a privilege, and it shouldn't be easy. It should not be easy for you to vote. You should have to work to do it, because we only want the people who really want to do it to vote. So I think a lot of these things are ideological more than they are about the actual math or about policy. They're being driven by their impulses rather than by their analysis.
But that makes the evidence anecdotal, and that can be problematic because elections do come down to math at the end of the day.
That's right.
Despite the Electoral College, which is
more or less down to math.
Right. I want to talk about the racism thing because it's massive, and I shouldn't even say it's a racism thing. I mean, America is a racist nation, as I have learnt to, I've discovered in a way that I didn't even really recognize. I obviously, my study of Jim Crow and the history and civil rights is one thing, but you kind of really need to have digested it and lived here to really get a sense of how it embeds itself in the very fabric of the country in a way that is quite stealthy and other times quite overt. And things like the Muslim ban that Trump brought about, and I know you've written about, is very, it seems to have kind of come and gone, and nobody really spoke up about it. And obviously there were a few members of Congress that did, Democrats certainly, but in any other civilized nation, to say we are banning all majority Muslim countries from entering our borders would have caused a riot. And yet here barely a whimper. And then they added 19 more countries to the list recently. I mean, if that doesn't speak to the level of systemic racism that exists, and that's just for Muslims, that's before you even get to black Americans. I mean, it is significant. And I see so much of that reflected in not just Trump's policies, but the strategy of the GOP as a whole.
Well, I think it's an exhaustion question. They are able to overwhelm the populace with so many things. In January 2017, when the first ban was passed, you saw massive protests. You saw people on the streets over it. And he just kept trying over and over as these things get struck down. And eventually people get distracted by other things, or they're worried about the war in Iran, or they're worried about ICE in the streets in Minnesota. And it becomes a place where you can slip things past them. I do think there is a really important moment of Islamophobia going on in this country right now. We've seen members of Congress saying that there's no place for Muslims in America. That if it's between Muslims and dogs, they know which one they choose. We see Tommy Tuberville saying the enemy is inside the gates, with reference to Zohran Mamdani. And this kind of virulent Islamophobia is certainly not new. We have seen it many times since 9/11. But what I see is the way it's accepted by Republican Party leaders, certainly by Trump, who has encouraged it with things like the Muslim ban, or by somebody like Mike Johnson. When Steve King was saying his worst anti-Muslim remarks, you had somebody like John Boehner saying, we have no place for that. Mike Johnson isn't willing to go even that far. It seems like a very scary moment in the rhetoric.
It does amaze me that Barack Obama got elected twice in this country, and it did seem at the time like a turning point, and that all of the efforts of the civil rights movement had been for the right reasons. But I do feel like that a reversal has gone on now. I mean, it won't be long before MLK Jr. Day gets wiped off the calendar by Donald Trump. I mean, he's effectively done that by removing the history of slavery and various things from museums, although many of those things are being fought in court. But we are very much living in Trump's dictatorship now. And
there's so many efforts, not just to roll back the, to use more racist speech, and not to roll back just the history, but to roll back the actual institutions that have enforced civil rights in this country. Yes. It is using the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department not to prosecute voter discrimination, but to go after these allegations of voter fraud. Yeah.
Well, there's 4 people working in that department now, David.
Right. Yeah. The few people who are left who are doing that. It's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, going out asking for cases of anti-Christian discrimination rather than going after racial discrimination or gender discrimination. They're weaponizing these institutions that were creations of the civil rights era, and these real victories. And when they can't demolish them, they just co-opt them and subvert them.
People talk about this pendulum that will swing back at some point. The difference between it swinging back for Joe Biden, let's say, after Trump's first presidency and now, is that the institutions that you just described have been destroyed. So is it possible for the pendulum ever to swing back when you don't have all of these protections and rights and mechanisms in place that put the country back to where it was pre-Trump 2.0?
I think that's a really important question and an important thought. I don't think people have grasped quite how much the institutional rot and institutional damage has gotten into the government. And I think there are lots of people who understandably would like things to just go back to the way they were. And I don't think that's possible. We can't do that. The next, whatever succeeds Trump, someone's going to have to rethink the way the government works and the way the federal government is designed. To fix these things. You can't just put them back together. You have to build something new. And that's something that's a project that really needs to get going soon. It needs to be going already, and it's something that I think voters need to be thinking about as well. I
mean, not least USAID and America's soft power. I mean, to deconstruct that in the way that they have has been projected to, or will cost, tens of millions of lives around the world. I mean, that is a genocide to all intents and purposes. How you argue that in The Hague with Trump on the stand, I do not know. But it is that serious, isn't it?
Oh, yes. And the years that go into building something like USAID, I mean, the relationships on the ground with local governments, with local citizens, all things, even if you wanted to put that back together, there's simply no way to do it. Those people have left the countries. Trust has been broken. You can't simply send new workers in and expect to, put the networks back together. That's a project of decades, if you want to put that back, and you have to think about it very deliberately.
And trust is a theme, isn't it? Because,
yeah.
And it was tested recently. Trump tariffed all of these allied nations. He insulted them, abused them, criticized them, and then came begging cap in hand for them to come help him in the Strait of Hormuz. And they all told him to go screw himself. I mean, is that alliance with all of these? I mean, I'm talking about Japan and Australia as well there, right? So does that mean that the wider picture, even outside of NATO nations and the European Union and the former traditional allies, even the UK, is broken, whoever is the president now?
I think that's right. I think a lot of those countries were willing to give the U.S. another chance after Trump won. They were very happy to see Joe Biden come in, to feel like they could go back to doing business with the U.S. And what they said at the time was, we're willing to take you back, but only once. If this happens again, we're on our own. And that's exactly, I think, what has happened. It's why you see people are not afraid of the U.S. in Iran. They see how weak Trump is, and how little plan he has. And they're not going to be bullied into getting dragged into the war. And they're doing their own things. They're building their own defense pacts. They're building their own trade pacts. You see the Canadians making deals with China. You see the Australians making deals with China. All of these countries that maybe have long-standing links with the U.S. and might even prefer a democratic ally to the Chinese Communist Party, say, well, we might not love the Chinese, but we can work with them. They're reliable. We know what they're going to do. They have a rational leader, and we need to find somebody who can do that. And the U.S. is simply not that right now, and we don't know when they will be again.
One of the most offensive pacts that Trump pulled out of is the kind of climate alliances. And there were many, not just the Paris Climate Accord, but there were many. One had, I think, 64 different clauses in it. But ironically, this energy crisis might be the thing that pushes nations around the world and the US to a more climate-friendly agenda by having their own green energy and not relying on oil coming through the strait and not relying on gas and actually switching to renewables. Ironically, I mean, Trump would hate this, obviously, and he hates the visual of wind turbines, and he doesn't understand that solar is free, and that there is an unlimited supply of energy from nature. But do you think that it could actually put the world back on track as they try to protect themselves from future issues, surrounding this military-industrial complex?
It would be a wonderful irony, wouldn't it? I think it's hard to say so far, but the longer the strait is closed, the more likely that is. And, you have Trump, as we tape this, saying things like, well, Strait of Hormuz isn't our problem. We don't get oil and gas through it. Let the countries that do deal with it. Well, that's certainly not good for trust. But also, if the U.S. is unwilling to be involved, I'm not sure who is going to open the strait. The longer Europe and other countries are cut off from sources, the more they're going to turn to alternatives. The more Qatari gas fields are damaged, it cuts the world supply of gas. It makes it much harder for those things to stay as the staple. So I don't know what will happen in the U.S., but I see in the rest of the world a lot of reasons to move towards renewables. In the U.S., even in the face of a government that is very anti-renewable, people are going to the pump and they're seeing gas prices, $3.75, $3.80, $4.25, $4.50, much higher in California. They're looking at their neighbors who have electric cars and saying, maybe I should invest in one of those.
Right.
For good reason.
And that's the other irony, isn't it? That Trump has been rubbishing electric cars. He's been pushing the kind of legacy car manufacturers to dump their electric fleets, which they haven't really done. They're not promoting them as much, but they're still there. Electric vehicle sales are still very high. Adoption is still very high. And you're right. Gas prices are not really an issue for people who drive EVs. I'll never forget that moment when Trump got inside the Tesla outside the White House, and he goes, "Oh, it's all computer," which is a sentence I never thought I'd hear out loud. Many of
these times they're pushing fossil fuels where it's not clear the market wants it. There's lots of people who want electric cars. Yes. I saw a story this week about attempting to expand coal fields, leases for coal on federal lands. And what you see is that nobody wants to mine the coal. It simply isn't profitable, as badly as Trump wants to make coal a thing again.
Or rebranding it clean coal, which it's a bit like rebranding gas natural gas. It doesn't fool me. That thing is methane, and there's not enough of it. And I think that this is the problem, isn't it? That you can only lie about the reality of climate change for so long before these weather events start to take over. I mean, we're witnessing it in real time. And so the Republican argument that, drill, baby, drill, and yet in so many Republican states, they're dealing with extreme weather events caused directly by climate change. And now they're not even getting the FEMA support. They're not even getting the traditional backup that they're used to.
Yeah, I think that was exactly what I was going to say. Is not only are they experiencing these events, they're not getting any help from Trump's federal government when they do it, because he has kneecapped FEMA and turned it into an agency that doesn't have any kind of capacity, led by people without any experience in disaster management.
Or who don't believe in climate change and think the Democrats invented it.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, just a final question before we take another quick break, and that is gas prices. And we started this conversation talking about the SAVE Act. Obviously, the cost of living, affordability, which Trump is tried to co-opt as a new word that he'd invented along with caravans.
Well, it's both a hoax and he solved it already.
That's right. So everyone was talking about eggs. Now they're not talking about eggs. We're gonna see the direct effect of gas prices at the ballot box, aren't we? I mean, as much as simplistic as it seems, there is a direct connection, and always has been in America, because it's a country of car drivers.
That's right. And you might not pay, people may not pay as close attention to the little changes in their grocery bill. They know they're spending more, but they don't know exactly how much whatever staple item is. But every day, no matter where they're going, they're driving past billboards that tell them exactly how much gas costs. And that is like a campaign ad against the president when he's launched a war like this that's driving up gas prices.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out going into the midterms. We're going to talk about the midterms in just a moment, and if indeed it's too big to rig, to coin another one of Donald Trump's catchphrases, we'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. Picture this. It's late at night, and I'm doing what we all do, scrolling and online shopping when I probably should be asleep. I find something I've been looking for, add it to my cart, maybe grab one or two other things, and then I hit checkout, and of course my wallet is nowhere near me. Normally that's the moment when I'm digging through saved passwords, trying 3 different logins, resetting something, the whole thing. But sometimes you see it, that purple Shop Pay button at checkout. One tap, all my info is already saved, and boom, purchase complete. Honestly, in the chaotic world of online shopping, it's one of my favorite little features. That button is powered by Shopify, the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and around 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And if you're thinking of starting your own thing online, Shopify makes it surprisingly simple. You can build a beautiful online store with hundreds of ready-to-use templates to match your brand's style. See less carts go abandoned and more sales go with Shopify and their Shop Pay button. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/weekend. Go to shopify.com/weekend. That's shopify.com/weekend. Thanks to HomeServe for sponsoring this episode. Owning a home is amazing until it's not. 1 minute you're relaxing with a cup of coffee, the next minute something breaks and suddenly you're dealing with water where it definitely shouldn't be. Repairs never seem to happen at a convenient time, and they definitely don't care about your budget. Think about it. We protect a lot of things in our lives, our health, our cars, even our phones. But what about our home? For most people, that's the biggest investment they'll ever make. And when something goes wrong, like a burst interior water pipe, a broken water heater, or even electrical outlets that suddenly stop working, the repair bills can get expensive fast. And that's the thing, regular homeowners insurance usually doesn't cover a lot of those day-to-day wear and tear issues. Things like plumbing failures, HVAC breakdowns, or electrical problems. And a lot of the time you're on your own trying to find someone to fix it. That's where HomeServe comes in. They offer plans that help protect homeowners against the cost of covered repairs. It's kind of like a subscription for your home. And plans start from as little as $4.99 a month. Instead of scrambling to find a contractor in a panic, you can call HomeServe's 24/7 hotline and start the repair process. It's simple. Just choose a plan that fits your needs and budget. If something covered by that plan goes wrong, you call, and they help schedule a repair with one of their local experienced contractors. HomeServe has been helping homeowners for over 20 years, working with a trusted national network of more than 2,600 local contractors. They've got 4.5 million customers, a 4.8 out of 5 post-repair rating, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. So they're the real deal. Emergency home repairs can get expensive fast, so having that extra peace of mind, knowing someone's got your back, is huge. Help protect your home systems and your wallet with HomeServe against covered repairs. Plans start at just $4.99 a month. Go to homeserve.com to find the plan that's right for you. That's homeserve.com. Not available everywhere. Most plans range from $4.99 to $11.99 a month for your first year. Terms apply on covered repairs. It's the Weekend Show with David A. Graham. I'm Anthony Davis. As we approach the midterms, it's not long now, really, David, is it? November will be with us pretty quickly. The timing of the Iran war is not helpful for the midterms. Traditionally, and maybe this is where Trump got it, if you are kind of winning a war, then maybe the American public are going to be like, yeah, go USA. But I'm not sure that that is going to apply this time. We just spoke about gas prices. I want to talk about why Donald Trump doesn't seem that fussed to be popular anymore. Now, we know that his score is collapsing. Where is it? Mid-30s. Mm-hmm. On some issues, he's 40 below. I mean, this is you cannot win an election with these kind of numbers. But the fact that he doesn't seem that fast, and the fact that he said phrases in the past like, I don't need your votes, I've got plenty of votes, and the fact that he just happened to win all 5 swing states and the popular vote last time around, suggests to some that the traditional form of elections and being administered fairly and freely is not really the order of the day anymore with the Trump regime in charge. Do you get that feeling that as far as they're concerned, they don't need to be popular anymore? They can just keep on winning, a little bit like Putin in Russia?
I think there's a mix. I do see some signs of worry. Trump has been complaining recently that, the president's party always loses. Maybe we shouldn't even have these elections. Yeah. Classic joking, not joking Trump moment. So he seems aware at times, but he also says, these poll numbers are fake. On the other hand, we saw, I believe it was Senator Kevin Cramer from the Dakotas, who was asked how he felt about the election. And his answer was he was glad he wasn't on the ballot. And I think that reflects where a lot of Republicans are and what they understand about the elections to come. Look, I don't know exactly what will happen, but I have seen from Trump over the last few months, and really starting from the beginning of this administration, a bunch of moves to subvert the election system, to interfere with midterm elections, and to do things to make sure the elections are less than free and fair.
It's quite definitive, isn't it, when you say it like that? and so let's get into the weeds. I mean, as I see it, even things like Dominion Voting Systems selling their company to a Trump-aligned operative, which seemed weird enough in the first place, considering they just had like $1 billion payout from the Murdochs for running a disinformation campaign on Fox. But there are so many mechanisms in place, and it's so fragmented. And we mentioned Mike Pence earlier. I mean, last time around, the whole game, this bait and switch, relied on Mike Pence. And, he took counsel and decided he didn't want to kind of break the law for Donald Trump. And now they ain't friends anymore. But this time, I feel like Trump learned his lesson and has put so many different kind of levels of rig in place, both at legislature level as well as at a kind of federal level. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a whole range of these. That's right. And so we see, MAGA aligned figures who have run for and won local offices where they oversee elections. We have MAGA officials at the state level. Republicans who are willing to oppose that in 2020 have lost primaries. They've been driven from office. They've been driven from the party. Some of them are now running as Democrats, for example, in Georgia. You see Trump putting in at the Department of Homeland Security people who are election deniers in alleged election integrity positions. You see Trump undermining CISA, the agency that has helped voting systems with both cybersecurity and also physical security. So there are all of these steps. We see Trump issuing these executive orders to do things like tell states or to purport to tell states what voting machines they can use, to purport to tell them what ballots they can count and how they have to conduct their elections with regards to things like proof of citizenship. These are not things he has any power to do. The president just doesn't have this power under the Constitution. But he's still he's saying he has the power and waiting to see if somebody will stop him. And then there's all kinds of other things we might see. We know in 2020, Trump was calling up Republican officials and asking them to find him votes and to help him out. He didn't succeed in that effort, but he also wasn't punished for it. So it's hard to imagine he wouldn't try to do that again. And, will Trump call out the National Guard or the military or put ICE or CBP in the streets of swing states and swing districts? I talked to a lot of election experts who are not people prone to hyperbole, who said it's something we need to be worried about and being prepared for. So top to bottom, there's all these ways that I think he could interfere with the elections and already is trying to do so.
Not least trying to seize voter rolls from states, which I presume will be so that they can purge voters from them, which is something that, again, the law is quite woolly over. That stuff seems to be happening in plain sight. And we know that they're being challenged, and there are, Mark Eliason and various people are taking Trump to court over these things. But it is certainly from the Project 2025 perspective, they still have a kind of 5-year plan. They've issued Project 2026 as a document now, haven't they? And that has a lot more stuff about women not voting and staying home and making babies and making a home and doing not much else, not having a job outside of the home and that kind of stuff. Is it that there are so many levels and layers to this rigging that's going on that Trump is just relying on the fact, when he seems to be so confident, doesn't seem to care about the cost of living being a problem for people, is because he just thinks he has it in the bag, or certainly when it comes to 2028, that he just ain't leaving. And that's just the way it's going to be.
I think it works on a few levels. And one of them is Trump is doing these things like trying to seize voter rolls, and they're prepared to lose those cases. They're prepared to issue these executive orders and be shot down by the courts, because what they're trying to do is make a case that the election was tainted. So after the election, if Democrats win the midterms, they can come back and say, listen, we tried to fix all these things. We tried to fix the voting machines. We tried to fix the corrupted voter rules, and people wouldn't do it. And now what we need to do is we need to cancel this election. We need to disregard the results of this election. So there's a lot of this losing in order to win kind of approach. They're trying to set the groundwork. Also, Trump has expressed concern that he would be impeached again if Democrats win the House, for example.
Yes.
I think he's concerned about some of those things. But Trump also isn't really relying on Congress to do anything. We were talking about this earlier. There's no legislative agenda. He's shown that he wants to sideline Congress. He wants to go around them. He wants to seize their power. That's the great success of Project 2025 is finding ways to sideline Congress, take over regulatory agencies. So even if Trump loses the midterm elections, he can still do many of the things that he's trying to do. He will continue to try to do them. And the question is whether the Supreme Court is willing to stop him. The record hasn't been very good so far. So I think he only has so much fear about what one midterm election can do. He still has the big pieces of power that he needs to do the things he wants to do.
And he's building global power with the Board of Peace, for example, where he is the chairman and he can never be fired, and he chooses his successor, and he can decide whether any of the legislation is approved or not. I mean, it seems to me, we talk about these maniacal baddies in movies wanting world domination, but that really is what we're dealing with here. And I mean, arguably Hitler was the same. I mean, they are cut from the same cloth, that they believe that they are almighty, and that in their case, they deserve to be running the world.
Yeah, these privatized government bodies, that you buy into, it's councils of wealthy and oppressive leaders appointed by no one but themselves. It really is movie supervillain stuff. If it would feel heavy-handed if you had written this into a movie script.
At the beginning of our conversation, you talked about European leaders who've taken their sweet time to recognize this, that he is nuts, basically, and that there is no one holding him back, and that he really does want to take over the world and thinks that he deserves it. We have to kind of joke about it because it's so serious that if you don't laugh it off, you could get very depressed. And that is a real thing, isn't it? And people are having to have these conversations. I mean, more Americans are leaving the US than ever before. People are looking at their kind of family history to see if they can get a Portuguese passport. Anything but to be in the US for when it collapses. And it does seem, certainly the dollar may collapse. It may not be the gold standard anymore at this rate. Do you think people realize, with all of the investment that we're seeing in things like AI, which don't really employ people, and the lack of investment in humans, and just the decision-making that's being made and the policies that are being signed off, that this is like a death sentence for the former United States of America? I
mean, you can look at people's sense of whether the country's on the right track. They don't think it is. I mean, I don't think anybody feels like things are going well. Even Trump, you can tell, doesn't feel like things are going well. You can tell just from the way he talks and the way he carries himself. There is a really bleak mood everywhere. And I agree. I mean, I think gallows humor has become a really important coping mechanism. But it's important to remember that it's a coping mechanism and not a replacement. The other thing, the Iran war and the economic fallout we're seeing from that have reinforced for me is you can leave the U.S., but it's very hard to escape American hegemony everywhere you go. So you can go to somewhere else and you can find a government that may have a better social safety net. But the American government can still do things to make your life very difficult. It can make it hard for you to heat your home or to work your job or to feed yourself, no matter where you are, simply because of these short-sighted, undemocratic decisions made by one president who thinks he has the power to do anything he wants and doesn't have to consult with anybody. As much as Trump and his allies have railed against a globalized world, they're also weaponizing it, I think, against everybody. We as global citizens are subject to whatever his whims are, and we're seeing the consequences of that right now.
I was always wondering how he was going to get out of NATO, like what excuse he would use. And now that I'm starting to get some clarity on that. I mean, he called NATO cowards this week. And it suggests to me that this war is a perfect excuse to say, okay, the US is done with NATO in the same way that he's pulled out of so many other alliances. But Trump also thinks that he can lie about things, certainly when it comes to jobs numbers, for example, and that no one's going to check. And it must be true because he said it. And I mean, I wasn't before, but I'm increasingly becoming a fan of Jerome Powell, who is one of the few who stands up to Trump. This is, of course, the Federal Reserve Chair. On Wednesday, as the Fed released its latest economic projections, Powell said that the U.S. has slowed, job creation in the U.S. has slowed to essentially zero. That was his line. And, I don't think I've ever really heard that before. I mean, briefly during COVID, but, it's not COVID times anymore. You can't use that excuse. You can't blame the Democrats anymore. So if you've got job creation at zero, and I mentioned AI and the kind of lack of human jobs, all of Trump's talk of investments, we've received $20 trillion worth of investment. I mean, these are all made up numbers. These are all countries that are making these false promises to him just to shut him up. And they're
because
playing
they know that he can't and won't hold them to him either.
Right.
Why they can say anything. He's easy to buy off, and then they can go about their business. Why wouldn't they?
So we are now living in a fake economy, effectively, where job growth is at zero, where there isn't much coming in. The tax receipts from the very wealthiest now have been cut significantly. How long does this kind of false sense of security last? And is it timed for the midterms, or will it miss it? I mean, there are so many things, not least Trump's health. There's so many things we're kind of banking on to happen between now and November.
For a long time, I've wondered when the economy would fall more, and it's felt like Trump has been very lucky in that respect. Things held up a lot longer than it seemed like they would. Global markets did better. Job creation appeared to remain strong. And what we're learning now is that with revisions, often that growth was not nearly what we thought it was. But it does feel like finally these things are starting to come home for Trump. They're starting to add up, and people are feeling them. But if you look at consumer sentiment, the American people have been aware of this for some time now. Even without the major indicators showing this, even without us being officially in a recession, Americans know the economy is bad, and they worry that it's going to get worse, and I think for good reason. So even if there's not a collapse between now and November, I think the damage is done for a lot of people. They've seen it. And, there are many independent and swing voters who voted for Trump. Maybe they didn't like him, but they did hear him talk a lot about the economy, and they wanted a change. And what they've seen instead is a president who writes off affordability as fake and who has done nothing in his term to try to bring down prices. He's only done things that have raised prices. They see what's going on, and it's reflected in the numbers.
Is it enough, though, to make those people vote for Democrats? And are Democrats shouting loud enough about the fact that they offer the alternative or the antidote or whatever? Because, that is the concern, is that we're not really seeing that many candidates within the Democratic movement that are stepping up. I mean, Gavin Newsom is doing his best, but, he's dealing with his own problems. And so, is there enough of a unified voice, and will Republicans actually cross the aisle in this moment to vote for Democrats, which is something that they've probably never done in their lives?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will just stay home. These people who Trump got to come out and convince them that he cared about them, and now they see that he didn't. Those people just aren't going to vote. And what we've seen in primary elections is Democrats are extremely fired up. They really want to come out and vote, and they want to cast their votes, Democratic voters. I don't think there's a unified message from the Democratic Party. I don't think that's as much of a problem in 2026 as it is in 2028. In 2026, people are voting against Trump. They see what's going on. They don't like it. They're exercised about it, and they're going to come out and they're going to show that. But Democrats do need to have a message in 2028. Presidential elections don't work the same way as midterm elections. And that's where it's important to have an alternative message. And Democrats have some time to work on that, but I think they've been slow to it. Many of their leaders have been very quiet. And so that's something I'm keeping an eye on, is who emerges from this cycle as an important spokesperson, and who can grab that mantle right after the midterms and start setting the agenda for the Democratic Party.
Well, Kamala Harris is, to all intents and purposes, is going to run again. I mean, this wasn't on my list of things to talk about, but I think it seems appropriate in this moment. Does that show a kind of collective blindness from the DNC about, taking a kind of litmus test for America in this moment?
It's hard for me to imagine what a Kamala Harris run would be about. I just don't know what even her platform would be. And I think the fact that she is, a viable contender at all says a lot about how the Democratic Party is at sea. There is nobody who can set the agenda, who can say these so-and-so shouldn't run, so-and-so should. There's not there's no smoke-filled room where these things are decided anymore. And that's a strength and a weakness. I don't see a lot of voter enthusiasm for another Harris run, though. And I think she's going to learn that sooner or later.
I mean, it would be beneficial, and we're giving a little free consultation here, but it would be beneficial to choose a candidate who hasn't gone away. And I think that this is the problem with the kind of cyclical nature of the system under this republic, is that you campaign, you lose, that you just disappear. Gavin Newsom is kind of trying to earn his stripes. He is not going away. He's very much in the public eye. He's making all the right noises. He's doing the talk shows. He's got the podcast and all of that stuff. He is an imperfect candidate, undoubtedly. And Trump's this week tried to kind of, Trump actually said out loud, well, he just lost the Democratic primary because he admitted to being dyslexic. I mean, that just shows how completely naive Trump is about anything, not least humanity. But, I would suggest that the candidates need to take it upon themselves to be present in these dark times. America is living under a dictatorship, whether you want to admit it or not. So talk about it and be heard.
Yeah, I think Newsom has been out there speaking. Pritzker on and off has been doing that role. Sanders obviously says he's not running, but he is always out there and always banging the drum. I'm interested to see somebody like John Ossoff, who I think has made some really pointed statements in the last few weeks. I want to see if somebody like that can emerge. But I do think it's very hard for somebody like Harris, exactly as you say, having gone away. She left, she came back, but we still don't know quite what her platform would be, and maybe she just got screwed over by the circumstances of the 2024 race, but we can't change that. I think that's the fact is she's a little bit of a damaged good for many voters.
It's a shame because she did get an awful lot of votes, and I happen to really like her campaign. I thought it was the right thing at the right time. But Trump somehow seemed to win a second time around. It just, as
He's the
time
luckiest
goes on,
man out there.
That's right. I mean, as time goes on and the more we learn about the corruption, it becomes more and more feasible that election was not all it was cracked up to be.
Perhaps. I mean, I think it looks like Trump simply got very lucky. I mean, he won at a time when incumbents were losing all over the place. He got the luck of Joe Biden dropping out late. And he was able to fool a lot of people by saying he cared about things like inflation. It only took convincing them once. Once he's in office, then he forgot all about them, and we see the results.
And the Latino vote is crucial, and to him then. What has changed since are abductions on the streets of the Latino community and just this horrific Gestapo-style enforcement for immigration. Do you think that could be the thing that really screws up the midterms for the Republicans and also for 2028 too?
What we see in races so far is strong Latino turnout, and it's for Democrats. It is against Republicans. We see in opinion polls those people turning. We also see some of the black voters who voted for Trump turning against him. And we see people who, I love these polls where they ask people who they voted for 4 years ago. We're seeing people who voted for Trump now saying they didn't vote for Trump. I think that's a pretty good indicator of where people are on this presidency right now. Okay.
We have to finish, but I'm so grateful to you, and good luck with your ongoing crusade. For now, David A. Graham, thanks for joining The Weekend Show.
Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News. You can find me on Substack at The Anthony Davis. You can join the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.